Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dogma Podcast, where we talk about all things related to hunting dogs and the hunting dog lifestyle. I am your host, Dr. Seth Bynum, and today we're going to dive into the weeds with CBD. See what I did there? Not only is Cornell University home to arguably the greatest Grateful Dead concert of all time, okay, I promise no more cannabis references, it's also home to lauded professor and researcher Dr. Joe Wakshlag. I wanted to chat with Dr. Wakshlag because, in my opinion, his team is spearheading the research behind the use of cannabis-based products in canine athletes. Great dog work, nice retrieve, beautiful scenery, and all those things come together, man. What a dog. Can't get enough of it. Dr. Joe has a lot of letters after his name, and each one is a testament to his commitment to canine athletes and our understanding of their unique physiology. He's earned his DVM along with a PhD. He's always doctor. In addition, Dr. Wakshlag is double boarded in internal medicine with an emphasis on nutrition, along with a sports medicine and rehabilitation specialty. Not only is he passionate about research, Dr. Wakshlag also seems to have an incredibly high pain threshold for that much time in academia. We'll talk about what CBD is and what it's not, how it works and when it doesn't, dosing recommendations, and how not all CBD is created equal. Here's my conversation with him. I want to make sure at the very base, people who are new to this understand that we're talking about a hemp-based product. So how does it differ from THC and other cannabis products, and what does the CBD stand for?
Well, CBD is cannabidiol, right? If we just talk about it from a plant perspective, you have plants that make we'll just say the grandmother of all cannabinoids, that's called CBGA, right? Cannabigerolic acid. And that either gets turned into THCA in the cannabis plant if it's marijuana. If you have a hemp plant, which is just a different strain of the exact same plant that doesn't make THC, it tends to make more cannabidiolic acid. And you sit back going, well, he's talking about these acids. Well, that's what the plant makes. And most people extract it, heat it during the extraction process. Or if you're a person smoking, you smoke THCA in a plant. And if you dry it, or heat it or burn it, it becomes THC. And that's why we talk about THC, right? We talk about CBD because that's once you heat the plant in any way, shape, or form, it forms CBD from those mother molecules. And so, that's why it's such a strange and Wild West kind of a supplement, because you got people out there that are extracting straight CBD and putting it in. You got people that are extracting straight from the hemp plant, which we'll call full spectrum or broad spectrum products. And so, these broad spectrum products usually have more than just CBD, CBDA. They'll have, other molecules like CBC. And then there's really about 100 different cannabinoids that can be made in the plant. Most of them are making derivatives of, CBDA that end up being CBD in the extracts. But there are others in there that may be part of what's called the entourage effect, which means small amounts of the other ones sort of synergistically work with the CBD to give you better clinical effect.
Let's take what you've discussed and kind of steer it back towards specifically to hunting dogs. And of course, in this community, we like to think that hunting dogs are 100% unique among other breeds, which we know that to be sort of true in some capacity. And then as veterinarians, we also know that's often not the case. A Chihuahua and a Pointer are going to be very similar in many respects. Do dogs have different amounts of these cannabinoid receptors?
People talk about cannabinoid receptors, and those are, we'll say, canonically known as CB1 and CB2 receptors. Those are primarily affected by THC. They really aren't affected by CBD unless you're at really high concentrations. What we know is that there's this broadening of where the cannabinoids hit. And so they call this the endocannabinoid dome now, right? It's actually not just about these two receptors that everybody's known about. It's about other receptors, like these things called TRPV channels. They're involved with pain. There's serotonin receptors that it hits, which is thought to be part of wellness and anxiety, right? So we have different receptors that we know they're actually hitting that are not part of the traditional system that THC hits. And so that's where it's becoming more interesting, and this is sort of growing. We know that that's how it sort of influences, we'll just say the neural transmission of signals from pain to itch to whatever. And that's also part of, the serotonin effect is part of why we think it helps with anxiety as well, or just sort of chilling you out, or cognitive dissonance in, your old Labrador who's just kind of wandering around and panting at night. And so we start to see how these older dogs, particularly, older hunting dogs, probably can benefit. And you might get a little more time out of them if you actually put them on that. Or your young, crazy hunting dog who just can't seem to stay focused during a retrieve, right? That's where we've seen it kind of being used in the sporting arena a little bit more, is in sort of giving you a little extra time with that old dog. You want to get that extra season out in the Dakotas because you want to take your 10-year-old lab out, and he's just kind of not himself. He's not quite where he was in terms of his joints and his pain level. And so we can kind of, we'll just say, get more time out of the old ones and make, I think, the young ones a little more trainable.
Yeah, that's great. And you touched on a couple of really specific applications for hunting dogs that I wanted to address. I'm interested in the anxiety piece and wondering what research you've performed or seen has shown in there for helping dogs. And I would say in my clinical experience, I will encounter clients who have given some sort of CBD product, and this is going to be across the board of quality and appropriate dosing. But for dogs that when they reach the point to paying for something like that, they're encounter a dog with pretty high levels of anxiety, separation anxiety, or usually it's like gun shyness is a possibility, but usually it's like firework aversion or loud noise aversion. How effective have you seen CBD in those types of cases?
What we have is, literature, and the company I work with, we've done some work on sort of the car ride models, right? These aren't real situations. I have talked to friends in the hunting arena that have dealt with, we'll say, the dog who doesn't travel well gets pretty darn excited, when you're going out to, do your trial. And they've tried it and they like the response they see is they're like, this young dog seems to just be I can focus him a lot better, right? While he's on this, he doesn't seem to be, ADD anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But it's a subtle variation. You're not taking a dog that's, destroying the kennel and in a couple doses, they're just laying on the couch. It's not a tranquilizer effect.
No. And that's the interesting part is like, we have all these drugs, right? We've got our, our gels that we give, the dexmedetomidine gels that really just knocks them out, right, during travel, and they're not going to tear apart their kennel, right, or their crate. This is a little bit more, we'll just say, still with it. They're still looking at you. They're just, more comfortable in their own skin. And I think that's where we see the improvements. And I'm going to tell you that, the dose I was telling you at around 2 mg per kg probably isn't the appropriate dose for that. We're probably talking more like 4 to 6 mg per kilogram body weight. And you're probably going to get, 4 to 6 hours of chill, right? And so it's not phenomenally long acting. And if you, let's say you're traveling for 3 days and you need to chill them out, you're going to be given that dose like every 12 hours just to try to, let's say, temper the enthusiasm for trying to escape their dog box.
Right. So potentially helpful, but in conjunction with some things we know are faster acting and work on a deeper level for those extreme cases. I mean, and those that are only for short durations, not a dog that needs this every day, all day long.
Yeah. And I think it's about finding that sort of sweet spot where they can still perform, right? And then also travel.
Right. You don't want to turn a zombie loose in the field that's stumbling over.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of people are going to want to use this for dogs that have muscle soreness or joint pain, things they've done maybe like in themselves with topical creams or oral forms of CBD, and then essentially in recovery. So can you expand a little bit on how you feel CBD works in those scenarios?
What we've kind of found over the past few years is that CBD and its we'll just say mother cannabinoid CBDA need to be dosed we'll say around 2 milligrams per kilogram body weight, or about a mg per pound body weight. And so a lot of people are just out there underdosing, even if they think that they're having some effects. Probably unlikely, because they're just not dosing appropriately. So, trying to find a product that's, we'll just say, first off, safe, has, just sort of been vetted, has, no toxins, no pesticides, et cetera, is always an important part of that. And that's something that I think every owner should be looking for, and saying, okay, is this a reliable, reputable source? And I think right at this point, we're kind of understanding that, after 5 publications all showing positive effects for pain, it seems to be something that can be used in conjunction with the typical NSAID, or can be used on its own. It's pretty darn safe. That's what we found too, is that the doses we're talking about are pretty darn safe to even give with other drugs. Other areas have been looked at as well. Seizure management, the convulsions associated with seizures can be diminished with cannabinoids, as well as even itchiness can be kind of quelled with cannabinoids. So it's becoming a bit of a panacea, because it's affecting the nervous system's transmission of just say signals, right? And if those signals are screwed up due to pain, if those signals are screwed up due to seizures or even itchiness, it kind of just quells the nervous system and puts it at, we'll just say, some ease. There's been plenty of, we'll just say, lots of preclinical work in like rodent models, and they run them on little treadmills or make them swim, and they show that there definitely is a positive response to recovery, right? They recover quicker, muscle enzymes recover quicker. They seem to be able to do another bout better the next day, kind of thing. So I think that's where it is. And a lot of antioxidants can kind of help with that to some degree, right? To a small degree. I think it kind of fits in that category as something that probably does help with muscle recovery. So much as like, the anti-inflammatory, well, God knows what that muscle soreness is. Yeah, they talk about, you get a mild inflammatory response in the muscle, whether you're quelling that or you're just actually allowing the muscle cells themselves to recover. Nobody really understands or knows exactly. But I think you can definitely consider it as part of your regimen. I mean, people are using all the kinds of things like quercetin and other antioxidants, from fruits and vegetables. This isn't much different. It's just another vegetable that we're getting antioxidants from. And these are cannabinoids, which can affect, we'll just say, behavior and whatnot, as well as, sort of the pain response that we see with it. So it may not be the inflammation, but it might be the pain response and that muscle recovery. So particularly when they're trying to do something multiple days, right? And you're sitting back going, he never performs quite as well the second day, but it's great the first trial. Maybe he's a little sore. Maybe he's, used up all his energy. That's why, all kinds of things like glycogen repletion are part of this. It's kind of a multifaceted. Yeah.
I love doing this because I always learn something. I'm never just rehashing someone's information. So I'm grateful to you for your time.
No, definitely worth it.
Yeah, let's talk about safety and efficacy, because CBD is available. I mean, it's just in my face all the time, everywhere I go, and from the gas station to high end sort of suppliers. So, what do hunting dog owners need to know or be aware of when it comes to dosage, which you've already addressed? That could be different depending on the concentration of what product you're using, and then product quality.
Yeah, I think that's where, we talked about the Wild West. We wrote a paper where we took 30 products off the shelf, right? What was nice about those 30 products is none of them would have been considered marijuana, right? Because they didn't have very high THC. They stayed below this 0.3 limit, which all hemp products, which was a good thing about the industry. Most people are using hemp and using CBD rich. Problem is that you had one product had 5 milligrams per milliliter of oil. Another product had 70, right? So, you go pick up one product and then you're like, oh, I'm out. I'm going to go just pick up another product. It's that concentration that's, it'll say, it's got 500 milligrams in 30 mils of oil, right? Well, that's not a really high concentration, right? We're talking about there only being like 15, 17 milligrams per mil. And so usually the bang for your buck and why things are more expensive is because you're getting more milligrams of the CBD in that bottle that was the same size. One's 69, one's 129. Well, you're getting 3 times the quantity, so it ends up being more efficacious for you. And then, your bigger issue is we found that some of them had heavy metals in them, right? Arsenic and lead were the two that came up on some of these products. And so I think that's where, do no harm is sort of the motto, right? And people are giving this stuff long term. If you got a lot of lead in there, then that's a problem. And I think that's where it comes down. And I know lots of people are spending lots of money on hunting dogs for sure. Last thing you want to do is pick a product that doesn't have, we'll just say, a complete certificate of analysis that tells you that it doesn't have, the heavy metals. It doesn't have the pesticides. They're extracting CBD with solvents like ethanol and methanol. We want to make sure it doesn't have any of that stuff in there, right? Because the last thing we want to do is cause a problem versus, help your dog. Pesticides, and then there's funguses that grow out there that make mycotoxins that can affect the liver and stuff like that. So making sure it's free of all that. And if a manufacturer can't give you that, don't buy it. If the manufacturer's like, yep, here's my COA, feel free to take a peek, then you can feel pretty rest assured that it's a pretty high quality product. And then it's about the cannabinoids. Do they actually, have what they say they have on the label? The label can say, 20 mgs per mil, and then you have it analyzed and it's only 10. That's a problem. And I think you and I know that there are products that get audited by something called the National Animal Supplement Council. So this NASC organization audits companies every year that want to be part of that system to really give the owner and the veterinarian that quality control assurance. So I say look for that little yellow label that says NASC, because at least gives you a little peace of mind that they're going through audit processes every year. And NASC tests their product and says, okay, stamp of approval. This is okay stuff.
No, that's a great piece of advice. And you use the term Wild West, and that's one I've thrown out there to describe the sort of supplement space. And I think that's very pertinent. So I'm glad there's some sort of body that's at least auditing some of these. I know it's probably hard for them to keep up with all those that enter the market. But that's definitely a great tip there to look for that sort of seal of approval that you're getting a certified product. What about, did you mention pesticides among those that they're screening for? Is that something they should worry about?
Decent farms aren't going to really use them. I mean, I'll be honest with you, the marijuana plant itself is a natural pesticide. I mean, insects don't like eating them very much, but a lot of farms are near cornfields and or near sorghum fields, and they're getting cross-contamination. We didn't see much of that and stuff that we've done, but if you look at some of the literature from just overall hemp farming in certain areas of the country, they found some, pretty high levels of even DEET, right? So not so sure we want our dogs ingesting that on a regular basis.
No, or me as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Hang with us. We'll be right back.
Pro Plan is always advancing with game-changing formulas that promote mental sharpness and support urinary health, that maintain healthy joints and help extend lives. Made by experts and trusted by vets. Pro Plan, advanced nutrition, supplements, and veterinary diets. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing.
If you're not actively protecting your hearing in the field, you're running out of excuses. With so many advances in hearing pro technology, it's never been easier to protect one of your essential senses and even enhance your hearing in the field. For the past couple of seasons, I've been using the Alclair EXP Pro. They're custom-molded digital hearing protection that I've put through the paces in multiple types of terrain and extremes of weather. Alclair cut their teeth in the music industry, which is pretty cool, making custom in-ear monitors for musicians, ones like I'm wearing right now to record this podcast. I love that these are loaded with tech, but don't rely on a charging case. I'm really bad about remembering to charge all my devices before an outing. When the batteries go dead in my Alclairs, which is pretty rare given the remarkable battery life in these devices, I just pop in a new set, and in under a minute, I'm back to the hunt. My other favorite thing about my EXPs is that I can manually dial up the volume to compensate for the deficits in my right ear. Having my hearing balanced for the first time since childhood has made a huge difference in my ability to pinpoint the location of sounds from flushing grouse or gobbling turkeys. You can turn the volume down if it gets loud in thick brush, or you can do what I did multiple times this spring, perch yourself on a ridge and dial these babies up to 11 to hear distant gobbles. It's like having a superpower. But my favorite part of owning Alclairs is knowing that I'm supporting a really cool group of sportsmen. Mark and Art and the team at Alclair are passionate about the outdoors and music, two of my favorite things, and I love the mom and pop vibe of their company. Check out Alclair on social media at Alclair Outdoors, or better yet, go to their website, alclair.com, that's ALCLAIR.com, and start building your very own custom pair of digital hearing protection.
We built this dog bed for ourselves first, but also for everybody. We knew where other dog beds lacked, and we knew we could build something that we, at the end of the day, put our logo on and our stamp of approval. Every little feature is important. It's wild how non-slip this base is. A Chevy's, who's a maniac, will jump on it and the bed will not move. It looks like it's taped to the ground. We made this dog bed that you don't have to take it apart to clean it as much, but when you do, it's an easier process. You're not going to break some zipper in the middle of it or get frustrated trying to put it back together. The material being water resistant, easy to clean, easy to spot clean, and just the comfort. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but it seems that most dogs prefer our bed over the others. One of the frustrating parts about other dog beds is the foam mattress material. Our 3D loop material, it's totally waterproof, it's antimicrobial, it will not mold. We wanted to put a handle on there so you can carry it from room to room. You can carry it to your vehicle, wherever you're taking your dog, but hopefully it's the perfect piece to keep your dog next to you, whether that's at the camp, at the lake house, at your house. We want this thing used everywhere you go. The Homestead dog bed is everything that other dog beds aren't.
Just pivoting a little bit here, talking about side effects of these products and dogs. And you mentioned that the doses that you're talking about, you didn't determine many in your research. And one of the things I hear from other veterinarians as a potential side effect as well, this is like heavily, CBD is heavily metabolized by the liver. So these long-term use cases are doing liver as extreme as liver damage. What can you tell hunting dog owners about side effects?
Yeah,
Negative side effects.
Yeah, I was about to say that, we, part of that NASC audit and part of being part of that, we'll just say club, is that they actually make you report adverse events every month. National Animal Supplement Council wrote a pretty interesting paper about incidents over the past 13 years of CBD adverse events and said it's no different than fish oil. Okay. So we know it's pretty safe at whatever dose people are using it at in general. At the company I work with, EleVet, we do it every month. And our number one thing is dog became somnolent, right? Just became a little bit, lethargic. And I think that's where, you guys are dealing with, we'll just say high octane dogs typically. So I'm not so sure you're going to see that like they do in a bulldog. So I always say to people, listen, start low, work high. Start at 1 mg per kg or, half a mg per pound, work up to 2 mgs. Make sure you don't see that because that's the last thing you want when you're traveling with your dog is a somnolent dog. I don't think we see it very often. We might see it when you're given higher doses at 4, 6, 8 mgs per kg. But everybody talks about the liver. Everything gets metabolized by the liver. Every drug that we tend to give gets metabolized by the liver. What we tend to see is occasionally something called the alkaline phosphatase, which well. It goes up, but just about every drug makes that go up a little bit. People say there's not a whole lot of high dose safety studies on CBD. There actually are 2 phenomenal studies of over a year, and then Steph McGrath at Colorado State did 36 weeks at 5 and 10 mg per kg per day. And she showed that alk phos does go up. Once you get to 10 mgs per kg, we might see an ALT go up, but we're talking about pretty high doses here. And in the pharma studies that were done with CBD in dogs showed that they could tolerate 25 mg per kg up to 100 mg per kg. And at 50 and 100 milligrams per kg body weight, they were definitely seeing transaminases go up. I'm talking to you about 2 milligrams per kg twice a day versus, 10 milligram. So that's where I think, go above 10 mgs per kg twice a day, you might see something. But at the levels we're talking about, it's pretty safe.
Right. And some of those, just to clarify for the listeners, some of those acronyms you threw out there were sort of the parameters we look at when we look how on blood work when the liver is involved, maybe a little angry or irritated, and those are things that are going to be slightly elevated. So you notice some of that, just some of it, which you could see through other types of drug breakdown too, you mentioned, over a long periods of time at higher doses.
Right. And I think this is the interesting part is that, it's like when we've done studies, it's usually older dogs with issues, and we tended, like when we did seizures, we saw no changes, but they were on seizure drugs, which all those caused the liver enzymes to go up. CBD didn't seem to affect it, right? We just did an oncology study. Well, it's an oncology study. We saw no changes at 5 milligrams per kg twice a day. And you sit back going, why? Well, they're on chemo. Their livers are really revved up and getting rid of things, right? So it's, usually the healthy dog, we tried 4 milligrams twice a day, and it's like 3 out of the 16 had this alk phos rise. No ALT, which is the one that we worry about more. The alk phos went up. And you're like, why was it those 3? And not the other 13, right? It's just so hard. And I think every dog's a little different in terms of how they can, in essence, metabolize it and get rid of it. And that's why we talk about personalized medicine in humans, drugs that will be good for you based on how your liver handles drugs.
Yeah, that's a great thing to point out, and hope people can resonate with that as they're making the decision. Is this something they should, because of that, still consult with their veterinarian? You think that's a great idea, or is it something they can take on their own?
Yeah, I mean, I always like it when people bring me a bottle and say, "Hey, is this good stuff?" And at least I now have the ability to sit back and look at a bottle and say, "Hey, it has a seal, great." Did we get a COA? Most good companies are going to put their COAs on their website. And you look it up and you say, "Yeah, it says it's got about 30 mgs per mil, and it looks like that's what they analyzed at. So yeah, we're in a good spot." That's a good thing to try. And then I just think that it's always good to talk to the vet, because if the vet is knows a little bit about this, and even if they don't, they're going to go look in the Plums formulary, which is what all of us vets look at. And guess what? The dose is in the Plums formulary. So they're at least going to be able to say, yeah, you need a mil twice a day. Let's start there, right? And say, based on what they see on that label and based on what they read in that Plums formulary, they're going to say, hey, this is a good place to start. And maybe they don't know a lot about it, but they can at least get you that sort of right dosing.
Right. And some of these reputable products are going to contain a dosing guide. I presume they should. If they don't,
absolutely,
it's a great place to start as well.
Right, and the vet will be able to tell you whether the dosing guide is BS or not. Right. So
good. So it's probably a good idea to touch base with them and let them know going into it, and hopefully you have a vet that can guide you through the process.
Well, I think that's always the problem, right? Is that the owners don't tell them, and then you see this alk phos rise, and then you start chasing other diseases like Cushing's disease, because you're like, this dog's alk phos is up, and then the owner says, I'm feeding, I'm giving a CBD product, or he's been on prednisone for the past week because of his itchiness. Oh, well, that's why it's up. So you don't chase things down. So it's always good to let your vet know so they don't start chasing things.
Yeah, just be transparent about it so they don't go down a rabbit hole looking for other explanations if something's different. Got it. Okay, so this next segment, I went through and I kind of created a portfolio of looks like it's about 5 dogs that I've kind of known, or some iteration of these dogs with certain conditions and ages. And I just was going to throw them out there and see how you recommended CBD being applicable in these cases. The first is a 2-year-old Labrador diagnosed with hip dysplasia. And he's got some limping after exercise, is what the owners have noticed. How can CBD help that dog?
I see the age, 2 years old, and I sit back going, mild limping after exercise. Would I try CBD? I'd try it, but I wouldn't expect that limping to potentially go away. You're going to maybe make him recover a little better. He may not limp as long. And I would say, that 2 mg per kg twice a day type of a dose with his food is probably a place to try. But I'm going to be kind of, transparent here. It might help, it might not. Usually it's the older dogs that I tend to see slightly better responses in.
Got it. That mirrors my clinical experience as well. And I think a lot of these people I think where this comes from most of the time is that there's a little apprehension about sort of traditional like medical therapies, like drugs like carprofen. There's just sort of that seems sort of, I don't know, because of this very close association with the plant-based product, CBD in their minds seems to be maybe a little preferable. So a lot of times I'll meet people that are going into the situation like this Labrador with only CBD. Whereas I think, okay, this is a time we actually might want to utilize, and correct me if you feel differently, other medications or modalities to treat a patient with that kind of disease.
Yeah, I like the combo of CBD and an NSAID, right? For the short term, just after the exercise bout, get them kind of, less limping for the next day or two, and then, take them off of it. We don't want to do the NSAIDs, long term. So, I mean, unless we have to, right? So.
Okay, the next one's we kind of touched on a little, but I've known many dogs like this. This is a 3-year-old pointer rescue with debilitating separation anxiety, gun shyness. They've given up on even trying to hunt this dog, and general noise aversion. Like if there's a thunderstorm brewing, this dog is shivering, hiding under the bed. They've tried the thunder shirt bit and that sort of thing, and they really only noticed, a tranquilizer like acepromazine or the dexmedetomidine gels working for this dog.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I like this idea of as the thunderstorm is rolling in or before they leave for the grocery store for a few hours, about an hour before, you dose them with a pretty nice dose of a cannabinoid product that I'd say closer to 4 mg per kg. And then see if you can get through the thunderstorm with that, or see if you can get to and from the grocery store or whatever without them tearing apart your house. We see a lot of people using. I mean, it's the company I work with. About half of our sales is actually anxiety, and people who are just trying to chill out their dog a bit. And so I think it's nice because you come home, you don't have this hang dog looking at you with droopy eyes. They just are like, all right, I'm on the couch. Life's not horrible, but but better, right, for them.
Yeah, it's always surprised me as an anecdote. Surprised me in practice how many owners are when they're desperate for something and they've been given a traditional therapy like acepromazine, and then I think that the experience having a dog tranked to that level is worse for them in the end than having the dog just go nuts for the fireworks. So yeah, we're shooting for a dog that is just taking everything in a little bit better and not one that's just completely sacked out.
Yeah.
So the next dog is a 7-year-old short hair that limps after a long hunt and has been diagnosed through x-rays with moderate and shoulder and carpal, so wrist arthritis.
Yeah, I think that's a little different than our 2-year-old lab, right? I think these are, we'll say, becoming more chronic neuropathic pain, the chronic OA, right, versus that early hip dysplasia. And I think this is where it becomes part of the regimen, right? I mean, you go to the vet, they're going to give you, NSAID that can help. The CBD can definitely help. And then it's like everybody uses gabapentin like it's going out of style. That might help. But I think CBD and NSAIDs, have better, we'll just say, evidence right now than even gabapentin at actually helping with that chronic OA pain. And I think that, if we talk about the safety, gabapentin's wonderfully safe. It does make them a little ataxic when you get a bit of too much of a dose in there and they get to that hang dog. I don't think CBD is going to do that, and it's as safe. And then I think NSAID, we're always a little worried, right? And we're going to check, for a liver. We're going to check for kidney. We're going to tell him if he stops eating, you got to stop the NSAID because of GI perfs. So I think it's part of that multimodal for sure.
And then another dog, a 10-year-old golden retriever with fairly advanced lymphoma, is already kind of losing the appetite. a little bit. It kind of got that muscle wasting and losing weight, especially in the hind end. Where does CBD fit into the protocol with this dog amongst hopefully other treatments?
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting one here is that, we hear everybody talk about potential anti-cancer effects, and we did some cell culture type studies with different kinds of canine cancers, and lymphoma tended to be the one that was somewhat responsive, hypothetically. However, you'd have to give really quite high doses to get, we'll say, enough into the bloodstream to maybe have that anti-cancer effect. It can definitely help a little bit with the attitude and just overall, he's kind of depressed. He's not himself. He's sick. I think you can improve just his overall, quality of life. But if we're talking about lymphoma, we're not going to be anti-cancer. We're just going to give him slightly better quality of life. And we're talking higher dose is probably not a bad thing here. We're talking instead of that typical 2 mg, we might want to do 4 to 5 mgs twice a day and see if we can actually, just improve him getting around, maybe wanting to go for that walk. And who knows, maybe you do have a mild anti-cancer effect, but we're not quite there yet in the research.
Yeah, I think in the case I'm thinking of here and others like it, it's more of like a palliative treatment. They're sort of exhausted though. They don't want to pursue chemo or other steroids or other therapy that may be of assistance, but they just want to have a nice few last couple of months or whatever. And so you're saying in that scenario, that's sort of ideal for introducing CBD as a potential.
Yeah.
Not as a cure of the cancer, but as a mitigating the other symptoms associated with it.
Right.
And then lastly, we have this is very relatable for so many people, a 4-year-old, I'll say obese, owner probably doesn't recognize the dog as obese, but it's obese.
Yeah.
Black lab, admitted in for a repair of its second ACL cruciate ligament repair.
Yeah.
Tear.
Yeah. It's like, how good was that repair, number one, and are they getting around pretty well after it? I think if you're starting to see the getting up slow, having to work out at stilted leg, kind of walk, we're in the same ballpark as that chronic OA dog, right? And I guarantee you by 7, you're probably going to be using CBD along with your other pain modalities. Do you need it for that quote unquote post-surgical repair phase? Not so sure. That's, why spend the time and money, because you're going to do NSAID, you're going to have that, TPLO surgery or that TTA. They're going to get better and you're going to notice that they're better. It's just about what happens 3-4 years down the line. And how good was that surgical repair? Because they're all going to get arthritis. They're all going to have OA as they get older for sure. It's just, it's the nature of the game. And that's when I'd sit back and say, okay, now we got to start thinking about some of this pain. And God, I'd seen so many master hunters that were out there with double cruciates, still kicking along, doing pretty well.
Yeah, I think this question resonated with me, not so much because of those that are going to go through with the second surgery and the normal protocol with physical therapy and NSAIDs and recovery, but there's a certain number of folks that they've gone down the road with the first knee and paid all the money and had pretty good results, but now they're looking at it faced with a second, and they're kind of financially exhausted, or at least like to explore with the help of a Google search ways to deal. Like, can we just kind of limp through this and kind of manage with medication? And of course, they're looking at CBD for that. So you're essentially saying this is not going to be equivalent to repairing something like this that needs a surgical repair with traditional therapies.
I think in the last 10 years, we've seen that TPLO surgery does a pretty darn good job of reformatting the movement of the knee so that there's not as much arthritis that develops over time. And as I said, I've seen so many. I was surprised at a master hunt thing I went to, and I was like, every third dog had at least one cruciate done, right? And they were doing just fine, right? Now they were 4 years old, like this lab. I just always wonder what's happening to them once they're 7 or 8, right?
Right. Yeah. Touch base with them again later and see where they're at. With arthritis. Okay. And then, so I crowdsourced some questions, and you haven't been exposed to any of this ahead of time. A lot of these you have touched on, but I'm going to try to filter through and bring out some highlights from some of these. So one person asked about that they'd read or said that they had read that the half-life of CBD was around 30 minutes. Is that true? And then how does that affect dosing and efficacy?
Yeah, I think the half-life is usually closer to 1 to 2 hours, at least based on the pharmacokinetics that we have done. We see, and I just always like, when we've done the pharmacokinetic studies, I was always like 50 nanograms in the bloodstream is going to be efficacious, because we know receptor dynamics and the amount that's in the bloodstream are probably are going to hit receptors that are important. And I'll just say that when we do steady state, like 6 hours after a dose, we're always like right around 100 to 200 in the bloodstream. And that's always part of this problem too, is that folks are like, well, I used 1 mg per kg, it didn't work. Well, your dog may be burning through it quicker than the other dog. So that's why we kind of provide a window. 1 to 3 milligrams, right, is per kg body weight twice a day, is likely to get you to where we'll see pharmacologically or pharmacodynamic responses in the disease process. And so most of the dosing we see in the literature now is twice a day, somewhere around 2 milligrams per kg. So that's always a good place to start.
Got it. And Google can help you get from kilograms into pounds, and language that we use more readily.
About a mg per pound,
yeah,
right?
Mg
so
per pound.
1 mg per pound.
Got it. Okay, and then like I said, you did a great job of addressing a lot of these, which is good. I knew you'd do that in your segment there. And then this one, so since dogs can't talk, how do you tell if the medication is working? And then what type of tests in a research setting are used to demonstrate the response to pain level or improvement? You briefly touched on that, but I wanted a little bit more detail myself, actually.
I mean, I think it's funny because you and I, Seth, we read these papers about force mats and force plates and all that stuff. And those are still, we'll just say, kind of in their infancy about understanding limb use and swing phase and things like that. Even the FDA doesn't take that data into account. The FDA takes into account client-specific outcome measures, which is, how do you think your dog's doing? And that's why you run it against a placebo. The canine brief pain inventory has been sort of the gold standard. It's been approved, in essence, validated, and that's what the FDA says. Yeah, you can use that as your outcome measure. And then there are other ones that are more client specific, like dog jumping in car more often. Dog runs upstairs more often. You have these sort of, is it better or worse? How did your dog do this week? And so that's why the placebo blinded studies are important in dogs, because they can't talk, but people can tell you they're feeling a lot better. But a lot of times people tell you they're feeling better when you give them a sugar pill, right? So that's what most folks have been using, are those sort of client-specific outcome measures to say that it's different than just giving a sugar tablet.
Got it. And just so people are aware, like these force plate things, and at least my understanding, and please jump in and correct me, is looking as like how much weight or pressure is a dog putting on a censored plate to say, okay, they're comfortable distributing their weight evenly. They're not trying to like partially limp on one leg. And of course, if the dog improves and can put more weight on this pressure pad, therefore they're feeling less pain. In theory, I think this is how these are thought to work. Yeah. I still feel like that's kind of tough to explain to people, but I do like the idea that it's these client reported outcomes that are driving this, and then of course protected by a placebo. And interesting to see people are still purporting. I think probably because they are just so enthusiastic about a positive outcome with the sugar pill.
Right.
Yeah. So this person wrote in, the only dog I know using cannabis products regularly is Snoop Dogg. Is there a risk of developing CBD tolerance in my DOG the way Snoop DOGG has over time?
We don't tend to see tolerance, interestingly enough, with CBD like you do with THC or THC dependent disorders, right? THC dependency disorders in people. That's because we're not hitting those, we'll say, very traditional cannabinoid receptors, the CB1 or CB2. We're hitting these sort of strange ion channels primarily, and those ion channels don't up and down regulate like the traditional receptors do for CB1, CB2, THC. And I will say that the serotonin effect, which is probably due to similar receptors to the CB1, CB2, because it's a very similar. You might see some will say tolerance. You may have to increase your dose to get that same anxiolytic if you're using it all the time. And that's why I like the idea of using it, intermittently, right? The separation anxiety, the thunderstorm, using it, on Monday and Thursday and Friday when you're going to do something, because that tolerance doesn't build up, right? But for the chronic OA, interestingly, we don't tend to see that over time. And there's been a 12-week study that showed that 12 weeks was exactly the same as week 1 in terms of clinical response.
Right. So for arthritis cases, the 12-week course, they had no detectable
No.
tolerance. Got it.
No detectable, right?
And then this person, I think you touched on this briefly, but we didn't dive into any detail. How effective is CBD in treating epilepsy on its own, and then maybe in conjunction, in your opinion, with other traditional methods?
So the refractory seizure cases that are on 2 or 3 meds already is where CBD has been studied and showed about a 30 to 45% reduction in seizure. We'll say appreciable seizure activity. And that measure is a 50% reduction in seizures. So we don't know as a single agent how well it's going to work, but we're just getting ready to do a little bit of work on that to see if it is comparable to phenobarbital. So we'll understand that probably in the next 2 years and be able to tell you whether you're going to maybe want to try CBD instead of phenobarbital as your first line of defense at the veterinary office, which I think will be really interesting because phenobarb is decent, still our go-to, but it's not perfect in terms of seizure reduction. That's why we have so many dogs that are on multiple things, or Keppra, right, which is another anticonvulsant. And I think always good to put on top in the uncontrollable, and time will tell whether we're going to be using this as more of a first line of defense.
So many clients that are on phenobarbital, they're complaining about the sort of personality change they see at the dose required to get where they want to go. And they're desperate for something they can either replace that with, or at least hopefully reduce the dose to keep the dog from being sort of in this mental fog. And a lot of them are looking at CBD as a potential way to supplement or replace. And what you're saying is not quite there yet as a single use drug for these cases, or we don't have good research to support that, but we're looking into it.
Yeah, actually, a neurologist read the paper that we wrote, and I wasn't even aware of it. And she goes, you realize that in your treatment arm of your study that 3 of the dogs got to reduce their phenobarb. And I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that. But yes, you're right. So there is probably potential there, as you say.
And we're coming to the end here. Any final thoughts you want to share with folks? You've been very comprehensive, but if there's anything left that I didn't ask you that you feel like people would want to know.
We used to have this old saying back in the day, I don't know, Seth, is that no dog should die without the benefits of some prednisone. I think we're replacing that with no dog should die without the potential benefits of CBD. I think we see that some of these older dogs with some developing real cognitive issues, and I'll just say depression, right? Some of these dogs, I think, do get clinically depressed, though they can't talk and tell us about how their lives are. That's the number one thing we see is that folks are like, I've tried all these pain things, and he's kind of losing his appetite. We're thinking of putting him down, and then they just go and use a CBD product like the one that I've been working with, and they're like, wow, I got my dog back. I mean, that was the most amazing thing to me as a practitioner who's been dealing with a lot of this old age OA stuff as a sports med guy here at Cornell. We were doing that study originally in 2017-18, and I had a couple people come in my office crying, like, I can't believe I got my dog back. And I'm like, I hope you're not on placebo, right? But they weren't. And I said, this is new. This is not just another thing that's going to make my dog a little bit better. It can really change the lives of some dogs. So I think that's where we have to sit back and say, not every dog's going to have the miraculous response, but when it's your dog, it's pretty impactful.
So people are going to ask me what product you recommend, and please take this platform to tell them about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we since 2017, when the company came to me saying they wanted to invest in research, and so we did the initial studies with them on pharmacokinetics. Vet continues to really be leaders in terms of the research, right? So all these disorders I tell you about, we've done studies in each of these areas. And we're trying to understand it across all species. We don't want any animal in veterinary medicine to not be able to reap the benefits. So we've got horse pellets coming out. We've got new platforms and venues, gels and soft chews, et cetera, just to make it a more pleasurable experience, giving your dog this type of a potential nutraceutical. And so I think it's nice to be working for a company that actually really respects the science of it and wants to do what's right.
Dr. Wakshlag, thank you so much for your time and everyone for listening.
All right. Thanks, Seth. Appreciate it. You take care.
Thanks again for tuning into the Dogma Podcast. If you learned something from this episode, please like, subscribe to the show, and share with your friends and hunting buddies. We'd like to send a big shout out of thanks to Purina Pro Plan for sponsoring the show and for helping my hunting dogs bring their A game day in, day out. If there's a veterinary topic or any other topic related to hunting dogs you'd like covered, send us an email at editor@huntingdogma.com or send us a direct message through Instagram or Facebook at huntingdogma.